Welcome to another of my videos about the genetics of chickens. This one builds on several concepts that we introduced in earlier videos. So in order to understand this one, you'll need to know a bit about the colour pigments eumelanin and pheomelanin, colour restrictor genes like the Columbian gene, dominant, codominant and recessive genes, the Z and W sex chromosomes and sex linkage and sex-linked crosses. If you get lost, go back and watch those videos again first. Up until now, my genetics videos have mostly considered one gene at a time, but I want to consider the beautiful laced pattern of chickens like the Wyandottes, in which each feather is outlined in another colour around the edge. The edging colour is usually black. Not always, it can be blue or white, but to keep things simple, let's just consider that the edge colour is black. Now that pretty laced effect needs more than one gene to achieve. When we think of lacing in Wyandottes, we usually think of this. The middle of each feather is coloured silver or gold. That's called the ground colour of the feather. And there is a single rim of black around the edge. It's called single lacing. But there is another lacing pattern called double lacing, and it looks like this. Of course, single lacing and double lacing have similar but slightly different genetic backgrounds. But like many things in chicken genetics, it's not quite the way you might expect. So let's find out how it works. Earlier we introduced some colour and pattern genes, including a couple of restrictor genes. You might remember how the Columbian gene CO restricts the expression of black eumelanin to only the hackle and tail feathers, and also how the mottled feather pattern is made by the recessive restrictor gene MO that creates a white tip on each otherwise black feather by restricting the black from being expressed on the tip of the feather. To see how lacing works, we need to look at a combination of three different genes, PG, ML and CO. The first gene that we need to consider is the PG gene. PG stands for pattern gene, and it's a very important gene in creating patterned feathers. It's a restrictor gene, and just like the restrictor for mottle, PG restricts the expression of black eumelanin from some parts of the feather but not others. In the case of the PG gene, the effect of this uneven pigment restriction is to push the black pigment into concentric lines around the feather, but it leaves the very outer edge of the feather ground-coloured, not black. The PG gene is inherited as a dominant gene. The pattern caused by the PG gene on its own looks like this, and it's usually called penciling. The second gene we need to consider is the ML gene. ML stands for melanotic. It's also inherited as a dominant gene. ML works to intensify the black eumelanin and also move where the black lines appear. If a chicken has the ML gene as well as the PG gene, the concentric lines of black become broader and shift towards the outer edge of the feather. So the concentric lines of black are fewer and wider, and there is a black rim around the very edge of the feather. This is called double lacing. Perhaps the most typical example is in the Wyandottes. Now let's add the Columbian gene, which you will remember is also a restrictive gene. We saw that on its own the Columbian gene has an effect on the colouring of the bird as a whole, but when it's also present along with PG and ML, it removes the concentric lines in the middle of each feather, just leaving a black rim around the ground colour of the feather. This is single lacing. The single lace pattern needs all 3 genes, PG, ML and CO. Now that we know what makes the pattern, let's think about the colour. And we already know how it's going to work. The ground colour is usually gold or silver. The gold colour is caused by the pigment pheomelanin. A Wyandotte whose feathers have a gold ground colour and a black outline is usually called gold-laced, although you'd think it would be more accurate to call it black-laced gold. In a silver-laced Wyandotte, the gold ground colour has been covered up by the silver gene. We mentioned the silver gene in my video about sex-linked crosses because the silver gene is carried on the Z chromosome. So, doesn't that give us a wonderful idea? Let's cross a gold-laced Wyandotte with a silver-laced Wyandotte. And if we do it the right way round, we'll get colour-coded chicks. Do you remember which way round it has to be? That's right. If we cross a gold-laced rooster with a silver-laced hen, all the boys will be silver-laced and all the girls will be gold-laced. Remember, that's because the males have 2 copies of the Z chromosome and the silver gene is dominant. So no matter that the boys get only 1 copy of the silver gene on the one Z chromosome they inherited from their mother, the silver-laced hen, they still express that dominant silver gene, and the ground colour of their feathers is silver. On the other hand, the females only have 1 Z chromosome plus 1 W chromosome, so they must have inherited that from their father, and he has no silver gene to pass along on his Z chromosome. You might need to go back and review some of my earlier videos about sex determination in chickens and sex-linked crosses, because this can be very confusing if you keep thinking about mammalian genetics. But the short answer is, if we cross a gold-laced rooster with a silver-laced hen, we'll get gold-laced girls and silver-laced boys. And we'll be able to tell the sex of each chick as soon as it hatches, because even at hatching, the chick down of gold-laced and silver-laced Wyandottes is quite distinct. This is the classical sex-linked cross, but all within one breed, the Wyandotte, so all the chicks are still purebred Wyandottes, just different colours. And yes, I've done this cross myself because I wanted to see it in action, and it really did work. Of course it did. Genetics just do work like that. Are we done? Not quite, because, as I said, not all lacing is black. But you'll have to wait for the next video to hear about different colours of lacing. Make sure you've subscribed to my channel and activated the bell icon so you'll get notified as soon as the next video in this series is released. See you soon!